Welcome everyone back to another episode of Q&A with Sharon's son George. I was my mother's caregiver after she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Sadly, she passed on 1/1/2020, but we started Together for Sharon.com in her memory and to advocate for a cure for all those still battling PD today and their families, because I believe, and as you also, I hope, will agree, no one's ever alone in this fight for a cure. Today's guest is someone I've come to know for some time and just inspires me like many of you do. And that's really what drives the show. We don't want anything but advocacy. And the only way I feel to reach more people and individuals, not even in the PD community, but also outside, is to have these conversations. So please share this. And I wanted to welcome Peter to the show. It's really an honor to have you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Maybe we could start by telling the listeners a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I've been diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's disease for just about 10 years now. But my background is actually uniquely focused in clinical study and clinical research. So I serve in kind of an operational capacity for both the sponsors and health service providers. And I've had about a 25-year career in that area. So that's the irony that I've been focused my entire career on, looking at clinical studies and easing the burden of participation for patients. And sure enough, here's this situation for me, actually being diagnosed 10 years ago. So it's a great opportunity. I feel that I know the disease, I know the people, and it's fun to actually be supportive of that. Obviously there's a lot of devastating moments that come along with this, but I'm very anxious to kind of see what the cures might look like. And I know we've made a lot of progress over the last few years. So I'll pause there for a moment and turn it back to George.
No, I appreciate it. And I think it's an incredible aspect of what you're bringing to advocacy. What are some of your recommendations as we start off today of if individuals out there would like to get involved too with clinical studies? What's some of the best options they might have, or where do they even start? I thought about even myself, but sometimes you get discouraged and you just can't find the right place or even the, most ethical. Is there any advice you might give to individuals who might want to participate?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's certainly one of the greatest challenges the drug development industry faces is both patients and investigative sites availability to conduct clinical trials. And that is routinely seen as the number one barrier to success. And it's such an easy barrier to overcome with the right type of support and engagement. So my strong recommendation is to work very closely if you have Parkinson's disease, either a neurologist or chances are it's a movement disorder specialist. But I would highly recommend working with your physician and your medical group to understand what some of the options are. That being said, that isn't always necessarily given the volume of work and demand on investigators and patients. It's often difficult to kind of have that discussion. So coming to your office visit prepared, sharing kind of insights, but, inevitably physicians will be very supportive of, engaging. And I found that people with Parkinson's disease are ready, willing, and able. And it's just a matter of being asked and being aware of what the opportunities are.
Thank you. And if you happen to meet, or let's even say a listener, unfortunately, was just diagnosed with Parkinson, is there any advice you might be able to share? It's almost like, okay, now we've just shifted my life. Now what?
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming at first. It's a lot to digest, and it's all the forms of grief and anger and frustration and fear, and all that comes to bear. But I think inevitably it's strongly supported by one's family members. So being engaged with your family and having an opportunity to share and work together with your caregiver makes a big difference. So I think being able to kind of achieve those goals and have that understanding and take advantage of all the resources that are out there, it makes a big difference, and it really the patient is waiting, and that's something that most people are waiting for as well.
One thing I really love is that you mentioned the caregiver. Maybe we could touch on that. It's odd that I am a caregiver, or was. There's a lot of time I don't even get to talking about caregiving at all because I'm so focused on, finding a cure. But talking about my mother's journey, I often don't have time to even talk about the caregiver, and that's what I was. So, from your point of view or your experience, how come caregivers really help individuals with Parkinson's, or do you have any also suggestions for the caregiver side?
Yeah, I mean, not to get into the hyperbole too much, but it really is completely dependent on the caregivers in many cases to kind of, you had asked about the clinical research participation process. So much of the challenge, particularly later in one's diagnosis of Parkinson's, mobility, transport, understanding, adherence to drug regimen, adherence to study needs. It's very, very intimidating and overwhelming. And that caregiver really does a phenomenal job. It is, it's a tall order to ask that caregiver to not only manage their own life, but to actually help a loved one or a friend or a neighbor in being able to contribute to their care. So again, I think having the focus in terms of, looking at the opportunities, being very supportive, understanding what the needs are, and really, it's so difficult for the patient to actually understand and comprehend and keep up with so many new topics. So it's often difficult, and one needs to remind themselves that these people are going through an amazing amount of life-changing events, and there's just so many worries, fears, and concerns. So having somebody else there to help document, interpret, aid, and assist makes a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. It's such a global issue, as you speak. Hopefully, it's okay to share you're in another country. Maybe you could touch on it, but I'm always curious about the differences, and where you are located versus here in the US, in terms of caregiving. I know I was, my mother's son, so being a son is also different than being a husband or a wife, supporting as a caregiver or partner, just a different world of aspect. I can go, I'm a man too, we don't talk a lot about male caregivers at all, versus female, which is another interesting topic. I can't go into the bathroom to help my mother. So we had to hire staff, which cost $10,000 a month, or even 12, I think, for 6, 7 months, which was not something that was easy financially, but I swore that no matter what, it wouldn't, there's no price to help support your loved one. So I was just curious if you could share with everyone where you're located, if it's okay, and maybe if you see any differences in the system, whether someone diagnosed or even caregivers from your country to ours.
I'm actually based in Paris. I happen to be in Africa tonight.
You're making me jealous. You're making us jealous.
Exactly. So wanting to be global, but I think the biggest difference I've seen, spending the last 6 or 7 years in Europe, is the family unit is, and again, it's difficult to generalize across the entire population, but it tends to be in Europe, the family unit is much more closer. And they're more, there's a routine of every Sunday they have dinner with their parents, or they, visit or call twice a week, or, a lot of, and again, not to suggest that, the Americans don't necessarily have that same relationship, but it tends to be a little more commonplace in Europe. And that's, part of Parkinson's disease is having that family unit and infrastructure. So, again, I think, the adherence, the education, the other issues, it's sometimes difficult to have that, but, having that tight family unit really does make a difference. There's other cultures, there's cultural differences, Latin American, Mexican will tend to, focus on the family unit with, potentially the woman at the head of household. India is more of a family approach in terms of, having the entire family decide on participation for clinical trials. So there is some variability, and of course, as I said, it's difficult to generalize across a single geographic region, but there is differences, and I think, the key point here is acknowledging those differences as you're developing a global research study or a global program really makes a big difference as you're looking at the success of these studies.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, just thinking about all the different, populations and things. Wanted to share now, as we move to a new area, which I am really honored again to have you, but also that you're a part of, is, your advocacy. Wanted to see first is the work with Michael J. Fox Foundation. Here I have up your profile. You might recognize this gentleman here. And maybe you could talk about a little, what was it like to discover the Michael J. Fox Foundation and also work with them towards advocacy. And what are some of the things we might be excited for coming in the future? Because as everyone knows, we've passed in the US the national plan to end Parkinson's passed. And there's been a lot more national attention. Sometimes I'm not sure if it's good because it's, more famous people are being diagnosed with Parkinson's. So that brings good things like advocacy, but we don't wish, that they had to struggle and battle Parkinson's. But maybe you could touch on a few of these areas, starting with, how you discover Michael J. Fox Foundation.
Sure. And back a little bit further, at the age of roughly 48, 49, I'm an avid fitness buff, if you will, and I enjoy running and swimming and biking, and I've done triathlons and the Ironman. So I was very active to begin with. And once I found out of the diagnosis, the one kind of critical element that anyone recommends in terms of making a difference on the progression of Parkinson's disease is vigorous exercise, and that's certainly something that was a big part of my life. So the reason why I mentioned that is as soon as I kind of learned my diagnosis or insights, I was able to very quickly access the different systems and people that I knew that were very active. And one of the first places I turned, as many people do, is the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and that certainly has a lot of credibility and a lot of excitement to that in terms of the focus they've done in advocacy work and finding a cure. So that was a good opportunity for me to get involved with that. And then again, since I was diagnosed, I've run 10 marathons in total, but I've run 2 for the Fox Foundation for that. I've been countless other exercise and kind of fitness opportunities, and I even climbed in Mount Kilimanjaro, all to all to raise funds for looking at research and clinical testing. So those were great opportunities to be involved and to get involved and to have that opportunity.
I love how no matter the obstacle, a lot of individuals with Parkinson's will crush right through it. Like literally doesn't stop them. And you might say yourself too, have accomplished things that you might not have if it wasn't for this world of awareness and advocacy. And just think it's a beautiful inspiration. I also want to thank you for all your work too with other organizations and some of the summits you've spoken to or at, and also a lot of the research you've done. And we've had a few actual other members who might have been with you at Mount Kilimanjaro during that actual Team Fox event. So we've been lucky enough to have a lot of the patient council and individuals out there advocating towards a cure. But please support Peter any way you can and help him through his journey. He's doing some incredible and fascinating things around the world. And I'm just honored again to be able to be a part of your journey and your story. Wanted to see if we could shift to the final part of the show. And I never like saying final because I do think after the show is over, when the lights, camera, and paparazzi leave, we still have to keep fighting for a cure because it's not over until the cure is at everybody's doorsteps around the world. So wondering if you could list 3 words that describe who you are.
Passionate, motivated, and a little bit crazy.
Those are all very positive. Even the last one, I must have to categorize myself with you. No, this one's the one that I'm always really excited to hear the answer or response to. But what is one moment or most memorable moment that stands out through most of your work with awareness that you can share?
I think this one actually hits close to home, but for me, one of the most rewarding aspects was the impact of my family supporting me. And my daughter, who's 23 years old, lives in New York City and actually joined the Young Professionals of Parkinson's, which is an advocacy group based in various cities and locations around the world. And she joined the one in New York, and they're actually focused on fundraising and others. So for her to have that commitment and to get involved and to feel that she can do something to contribute to her father's condition is really just a very touching, very emotional and impactful opportunity.
Thank you. And that actually kind of goes with the next question. This is not always easy. Obviously, you have a battle in your own hands, which we are standing right by your side always. So never forget you're also, and no one listening is alone in this fight. But I was wondering in this moment, you're the spokesperson, obviously, and we are grateful for your work. But sometime and for this show, I like to take a moment to thank those in your life and the people who support you because I know in my life I wouldn't be able to do this without their support. So I was wondering who helps you during times of struggle.
And my caregiver, my wife, Vicky, has really been a strong force in helping me manage the condition. And there's been a lot of difficult challenges over the last 10 years. And she's been my rock and staying there. And, my family's a big part of that as well. But Vicky's clearly, supported me. And she's actually in the drug development industry as well. So ironically, she's kind of in another capacity of focus on patients in clinical research. So again, it's just, um, you know, it doesn't always come easy to remember all the people that are helping you and do that. But I'm blessed by people all around me that have really helped combat this disease with me, and we're all working for a cure.
Well, we send our love to your wife and your whole family, as well as all those around you that help you make this possible. So thank you again. Um, this is a out of bounds one, which I love. You ready? We might need a drum roll, but if you were asked to write a script to a movie about your life story, what would you call it, and what actor would play your role?
Um,
We like to make everyone think on this show.
yeah, that's I'm definitely. All right, well, I'll go with the easy one first. I'll have George Clooney join as
I
my
love it.
double.
I should probably have multiple choice because he's always at the top or something.
Yeah, George Clooney tends to kind
I
of
thought a little bit more Denzel, but it's okay.
or actually, you can look at, not to plug another show, but if Harrison Ford,
I love it.
is part of, his work that's coming out now, it's a great show if you haven't seen it, but he actually portrays someone with Parkinson's disease. It's quite encouraging. So that, but in terms of a name,
By the way,
pers-
we do recommend to see Shrinking, and we recommend that Mr. Ford come on the show. And
yes, absolutely.
Peter will join us again if he if we could get it done.
Persistence is probably the word I'd use for from my description. So
I like it.
persistence, and then any one of those actors would be fine.
If you had the opportunity to speak to a younger Peter, like let's say 10 years ago, who just kind of, was advocating, is there any advice you would give to yourself, the earlier Peter?
I'd say enjoy the ride. I think, like a lot of younger people, I basically felt that I was invincible and I could do all these crazy athletic events and, do all these things. And then, really threw me for a loop, my diagnosis. And, it gave me strength to fight through it. But I didn't fully appreciate the engagement and how lucky I really was in life, until someone turns the mirror on you like this and, points out some of the opportunities. So, I've been blessed, and I'm very encouraged by the future that we all face with this disease.
You have a question, and I always say a burning question. I've had things in my life where I'm so curious, I want an answer, but I don't bother asking because I don't think I'm going to find an answer, or maybe I won't like it. But is there some kind of area, Parkinson's awareness or advocacy, or even the future, battling the disease that kind of is in your stomach, and not in a bad way, but it kind of, gets you going and you really want an answer, but you don't ask because you don't think there will be one yet?
I think my internal frustration is just it just feels like it's taking too long. I mean, we benefit from all the resources and financial and time and everything that's involved with advocacy, legislative input, global efforts, congressional agreements in terms of, funding for the Cures Agreement. There's just so much going on out there, and I just feel like we should see more. And, I'm not suggesting that people aren't kind of absolutely motivated and committed to this, but I want to see more. And I'm an impatient guy, and it might not impact me, but I sure as hell want to have an influence on this before I leave this earth. So it's just I really want to feel like we're making an influence and being able to pursue and make a difference.
I remember when my mother was struggling, and towards the end, unfortunately, we even saw a story that there could be a pill that could cure Parkinson's within 3 days, and we were all really excited. And obviously, it was too late for us, but that's why we have to keep fighting. Whether or not my mother, is not here, which I wish she was. Still don't want you or anyone listening to go through this, or the caregivers or care partners or everybody involved. So thank you again for that. We just added a few new questions, so we'll try those out. This is like when the comedian goes to the small club and wants to test out his or her work. But is there someone who you actually always wanted to speak to or interview on advocacy, but never had the opportunity?
It's probably an easy answer, but I've had the benefit of meeting Michael J. Fox on several occasions. I didn't have a long conversation, but it would be great to kind of have a more lengthy conversation just in terms of his experiences. And I think that has to be
We're,
a great opportunity for me.
Well, today the show is special because we're asking Mr. Fox too if he'd like to come on, and Peter will be welcome back. So it'll be a double interview. It'll be beautiful. And actually, I had the honor too to meet him a few times. And unfortunately, when I met him, I got to tell him about my mother and told him how much we love him. And it's even hard to even say live now, even years later, that I told him we love him, and that, and he actually took the band we made for my mother and wore it, and it was a beautiful moment. But I saw he was struggling, and part of me, like internally, if you have those two people, one's like do it, one said don't do it. I saw him kind of a little bit my mother in him. I don't know if it was just the timing of the day, and I felt like he wasn't doing well. So I said, let's scrap the asking to come on the show. But Mr. Fox, if you're out there, if I ever see you again, the only part of the question will be, please join us on the show, because this is for awareness. And Peter also would love to get a chance to sit down together. So thanks. Uh, Only as we wrap up, unfortunately, it's, again, this has to be shared. I know Peter will, and I hope everyone listening will as well, because I think that the only way we'll be closer to a cure is through awareness. And grateful for Peter, your time today. But I was wondering if you had an opportunity to meet your hero, and it could be Mr. Fox, so we answered that. But who is your hero, and what would you say to them in that moment?
I have to go back to my wife as my hero.
That's great.
She's made an undeniable influence in my life, and I think I'd be lost without her. So I'm very fortunate to have that relationship.
I love that, and I really appreciate your honesty and all that you do. And just wanted to ask this question: if you, and you kind of did allude to it, but if you could leave the Parkinson's community today with some words of encouragement, what would they be?
Just get involved. Doesn't, however little, however much, it doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be financially driven. Just get involved. Just offer some, input and participation. There's just so many good things that are happening out there, and I think having the opportunity to participate and be part of that is everyone can make a difference, and no matter how big or small, it's all for finding a cure.
Thank you for your time, your friendship, and those words, because like I said before we met, you truly inspire me to not give up. And even on my tougher days, some of you know I've had many surgeries lately. I don't know how, why, but the second I get out of anesthesia, I grab my phone and keep advocating for a Parkinson's cure, because my heart, that's the only priority right now, and will always be in my life until there is a cure at everybody's doorsteps around the world. And from Florida to New York to Africa to England. We want everyone to win this battle, and never forget those who unfortunately didn't. So thank you again, Peter. I have a little message for you and everyone listening. We love you. We support you. We care a lot about you, and you're never alone. I, along with Peter, will advocate for you, and together our voices are so much stronger. And I always end the show for now by saying I'm just getting started, because obviously Peter and I have been doing this for some time. But any day I do decide I'm tired, I can't do anymore, I look to Peter, I see his inspiring work with advocacy, and realize that I still have a lot more work to do. And so does everyone out there. And just so grateful again, Peter, for your time. Just such an honor to have you today.
My pleasure, and you have a very proud mother up there
Thanks.
celebrating your successes.
I always joke, and when people say that, and if you met her, she would say, George, don't waste your time, spend it with your family. So I think I agree with you, but you would laugh. She definitely made me laugh, and that was one of the things I sadly miss a lot, but I do continue on through you, who's made me smile and, gone through a lot of emotion today, and it's something I will never forget. It's going to stay in my heart. Beyond just a cure. So thank you again. And also thank you everyone for listening. This has been another episode of Q&A with Sharon's son George. Please stay tuned. We have so much more to come. We still have more work to do until the cure is at everybody's doorsteps around the world. Please support Peter and all he's doing, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and please share this, because like the only way I always say we can really make a big dent and send a message to the world is to share, share, share. So thank you, Peter, again. Thanks everyone for listening. We love you, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.